Here are 7 ways that understanding really, truly, and fully your own needs is so important. Hey everyone, welcome to my channel where I give you tips and insight and strategies to have your best life and most fulfilling relationships. If you want a little help with any of this, you can look into my coaching below. We can do a 20-minute consultation and I can see if I can help you out or if I can point you somewhere else. And I do have an occasional newsletter as well, so check that out down below as well. So today I wanted to just give you a little list of 7 reasons that you might not have thought of in this way for why our needs are so important. And I'm talking about all kinds of needs, right? We have really, really basic needs, food, shelter, things like that. We also have psychological needs. And then we also have personality needs. So our needs can also look like something that maybe we might have thought of as wants before. And why we call them needs in this particular case is because we're talking about needs in order to have that most fulfilling relationship and most fulfilling life, right? So they're not needs in the sense that we'll die without them, but they're needs in that context of wanting to really expand our ability to have a fulfilling life. So as part of what I sometimes do with people, we'll do a needs assessment. And so the number one reason why it can be important to do that, to understand your needs fully, is kind of what we come to in that. So a lot of the things that people see in there, they knew about already. Some of them they didn't necessarily think of it as needs yet, like I said, partly because they can be those personality needs. But sometimes people will uncover things that they didn't even realize were their need. And so that number one reason for why it's important to understand your needs is because there could be ones that you're not either considering or taking into account, and then you're not attempting at all to get it met because of that. Sometimes people even, I've mentioned this on this channel before, but sometimes people even feel like a need, they shouldn't have a particular need. Like if they have a need they just really are interested in investing or something like that, but they don't feel like they should focus on money, or, for whatever reason, they have a judgment around a particular need, maybe because of the way they grew up or for some other reason. So sometimes there can be those unacknowledged needs. And when they discover those, then that can be a way to move towards a more fulfilling life. And so the number two reason why it's important to understand your needs and to really do that inventory and figure out what they really are, ones that you may be aware of already and may not be, is going to lean more on that piece of the ones that you do already know about. So the things that you're doing already that, maybe you thought of as just a part of your personality, you didn't maybe consider it a need, or maybe you did think of it as a need, but those ones that are already happening, you can lean into more, because really we have to receive, right? We have to feel into when we're actually doing these things that are so fulfilling for us in order to receive them, in order to have that fulfilling feeling. And so when they're really made more conscious like that and identified, then we can actually receive and experience them fully. So the third reason why it can be so important to really understand what your needs are in all kinds of different categories and areas is because it is really about your own self-acceptance. These needs, these ones especially perhaps that are more these personality needs, are what make you who you are. They are what form your personality. And so when you really understand those and accept them and are really honing in on them and trying to satisfy those needs, that is really a very big way of self-acceptance. Not just, we often think of self-acceptance more as what we say to ourselves or internal dialogue, which is very important. But this is actually in the way that we live our lives and what we're putting our time into. And so how we're showing our self-acceptance for who we are. The fourth reason it can be so important to understand our needs is because when we understand them fully and have identified them, we can broaden out the ways that we're meeting them. So for example, relationships is a big way this can show up, is we maybe think we can only get certain kinds of attention from a romantic partner, for example. And while there's truth to that being sort of the most direct and fulfilling way for certain kinds of needs, we can broaden out actually, like even giving ourselves like comfort and attention and certain things like that, or perhaps seeking it from someone else. And the reason that can be important is because it makes us less desperate when we have that broader way of getting particular needs met. And of course, the foundational thing, though, in order to get to that point of even broadening out how we have it met, is to understand those needs in the first place and to really see them for what we are, for what they are, and for, part of that is understanding the ways that we're seeking already to get that met. And, a very specific example of that, like I said, in a romantic relationship, we still would seek it from a romantic partner, of course, but we wouldn't have that sort of energy of desperation if it's not the only way we're getting any of that bucket filled for that particular need. And we know that energy of desperation often can be challenging and cause problems because people don't, they may want to help us fill the need even, but coming at someone with that needy sort of energy, isn't the ideal way to have the interaction of reciprocity and just sort of that flow of love and attention and care that can just flow more naturally without that desperation. All right, the fifth way that it can be helpful to understand your needs relates back to that receiving again. So I talked about this a little already. I'm just going to take it a slightly different way in this particular piece of information, but it's kind of around when we understand and are feeling into our needs. It's sort of how we're strengthening the skill of receiving overall. So it helps us just to work on receiving. And that can then be in other ways too. Like it can help us to receive in a relationship. Like what's interesting is sometimes there can be a dynamic where someone feels like they're not getting a need met, and the partner may even be needing it in certain ways that the other person can't receive because they're looking for it in a particular way, right? So anytime we sort of strengthen that skill, whether it's with someone else or our own needs being met and feeling into it, when we can strengthen that skill of receiving, I think it's a really underlooked at piece of like how to have a more fulfilling life and have more fulfilling relationships is this receiving piece. So strengthening that skill is very important. And understanding our needs is a very big way to go about working on receiving. All right, the sixth reason that it's so important to understand our needs has to do with self-sabotage. So a lot of the time, self-sabotage is caused by competing needs. So for example, maybe you have a need for spontaneity that you're ignoring. And then, you also have a need to be social. And so you schedule things, but then you keep canceling at the last minute and you don't understand why. So there's so many ways self-sabotage can look, right? But in that particular case, if you understood that scheduling too many things was, leading and not acknowledging your need for some spontaneity was the problem, then you could solve that sort of sabotage that was going on with your need that you were acknowledging around having social needs met by particular scheduled activities. So again, this can look so many different ways, and we often think of self-sabotage in other areas, like around new habits we're trying to create or habits we're trying to break. And it definitely is true in those cases as well, to look for that underlying need. I've talked about that before on the channel as well. But so self-sabotage, it can really help give us insight around that and know what to do around that when we understand our needs. All right, the seventh reason it's so important to understand our needs has to do with something I talked about in my most recent video, which is that we can link a need we have to something that we're trying to do, maybe that's challenging. So you can use that self-knowledge to link something that, let's say there's something you just find boring, but you really have to get it done. Like let's say it is to do with just getting a task done that you don't want to do. You may have ever heard people who bring in someone else, right? Like bring in someone else to at least be there with them while they're cleaning out the closet. Or so in that case, what they're doing without maybe consciously realizing it, it's not just about like that it's more fun in general, but it could be that they have the need to spend some time socially with someone. And so they're trying to pull that together. They're trying to pull that in for the other thing that they're trying to do. And just like the self-sabotage one, there's just endless ways that this can look, endless examples that I could give of this. For example, sometimes it looks more like, I mentioned in that last video, where it could even be about a value. Let's say someone is really having trouble eating better and they don't, they know they're supposed to care about their health, but they just, for whatever reason, that just isn't enough to motivate them. But they are very socially conscious and they want to help their local farmer, and they also like want to start eating organically for other reasons. And so maybe they're able to really lean on that value by understanding that they have that need for that kind of consciousness, and they can pull that in then towards buying those kinds of foods and then eating them. And then they're thinking of it more as that than even about their health, even though that has it's what in the first place triggered the attempt to make the change. So all these different ways it can look like, where when we understand our needs and we really like can see them fully and acknowledge all the different ones, then we can use them proactively in these ways to help us make other changes. So hopefully that was helpful. I'd love to hear any of your own experiences about this in the comments, or if you have any ideas for further content. And thank you so much for watching.